It is indeed a singular honor to have been invited to join you this afternoon at this Mining Indaba. Indeed, it is fitting that this occasion should coincide with the 25th anniversary of the achievement of democracy in South Africa. Given the significant role that the mining industry has played in the construction of present-day South Africa, it is for us a truly great occasion. It is also doubly so because as the Mining Indaba, you are also celebrating 25 years of holding this Indaba. So our histories, our stories, and our paths do coincide. This Indaba offers us a valuable opportunity to do a number of things, but more importantly, to engage with investors from across the globe, seeking opportunities for new and further investments in the mining industry on our continent. It is important for us that the investors that many of you represent are here, and you aim not only just to bring your money, but you obviously are here to create value for your shareholders, for yourself, by increasing the value of your investments. And in this way, you also become our partners on a journey of inclusive development. We are pleased to note that a full day has been dedicated to deal with the issues pertaining to our beloved continent's sustainable economic development. This demonstrates the mining industry's determination to become an integral part of the social forces that are working to address all the social, economic, and environmental challenges related to mining activities on the continent. We, as Team South Africa, have just come back from Davos. And we've also just come back from a state visit in India, where we engaged the investment community of the world on, amongst other things, South Africa's ambitious program to mobilize for investment in a big way. But we also took time to talk about our own continent. We took time to address some of the challenges that some of the countries on our continent, not only ours, are facing. And our message to international investors was just simple and straightforward. All of us, as African countries, and indeed as South Africa as well, we are taking practical measures to build economies that are underpinned by inclusive growth, competitiveness, as well as transformation. This message, right across the walls of the World Economic Forum, found practical expression in the minds of a number of people as they listened very carefully and paid heed and attention. We also articulated another message about some countries that are facing challenges, economic challenges, such as Zimbabwe. And we said we would like the sanctions that had been imposed on Zimbabwe to now be lifted, to help Zimbabwe embrace democracy more fully and firmly, and that country should move ahead. The message that we also put forward also found practical expression in the inaugural South African Investment Conference, which we hosted last year. Several companies that are represented at this conference came and attended our inaugural investment conference after we had appointed 4 investment envoys who went through the length and the breadth of the world, and indeed our own country as well, mobilizing investments. These companies that attended our inaugural conference, and many they were, from many countries around the world, made investment commitments that amounted to $20 billion in total. When we conceptualized the holding of this conference and the mobilization of investment, we wanted to raise $100 billion in 5 years. Just in a few months, we were able, and 7 months at that, we were able to mobilize full commitments that are backed up by projects, $20 billion, meaning that clearly indicating that we were already ahead of the target that we had put in place. And these announcements are a clear indication that the South African economy does indeed have a lot to offer, and that opportunities for growth are indeed in abundance if we harness our areas of comparative advantage and also create a conducive climate for investments. The pledge, the commitments made for $20 billion were a clear indication that South Africa indeed is still an attractive destination for investment. Your presence here, not only for South Africa, no doubt, but the African continent, is a clear demonstration that you see this continent of 54 countries as a continent which is becoming more and more attractive for investment. The fact that 3 of these major investment announcements came from the mining sector gives credence to our view that mining in South Africa is indeed what we can call and regard as and characterize as a sunrise industry. Many have often said that the sun is setting on South Africa's mining industry, it having been the leading industry on the whole continent, and it having been the bedrock of South Africa's economic development, both from a manufacturing, industrialization point of view. Many had thought that it is facing its sunset days, and we are firm believers in knowing that South Africa's mining industry is in its rising sun days, and long will it last. For those who want to look closely again, you can spend time with my Minister of Mineral Resources, Gwede Mantashe, who knows this industry in and out. Having worked in the industry underground as a mine worker, and having worked as a manager underground, and we saw talent in him and recruited him into the union, became a militant trade unionist, and finally he became the leader of the union, and we've polished him a bit. We've polished him a bit, and we've now made him Minister of Mineral Resources. You truly can't get better than that. You can't get better than that, a man who's been so deeply involved in the industry. He now wears a suit. He never used to wear a suit. Now look at him, he wears a suit and he looks very dignified. We expect that these companies that have made these commitments will make a valuable contribution to accelerated economic growth and greater job creation. We have recognized that we will not be able to meaningfully reduce unemployment and poverty in our country without increased investment, particularly in critical areas of our economy, in areas that matter most for this economy, especially the productive sectors, of which mining is an important part. South Africa's mining industry has a long history in our country, a history that spans over 150 years. The country's mineral wealth has attracted large investments over the past decades, resulting in the development of integrated industrial value chains that generate significant value for the economy of our country. And South Africa holds the world's largest, as many of you will know, reserves of platinum group metals and manganese, and some of the largest reserves of gold, steel, diamonds, chromite, ore, and vanadium. As government, we regard mining as a key player in the future growth and development of our economy, with huge potential for exploration, production, and beneficiation. And when it comes to exploration, I've asked Minister Mantashe that why has exploration tapered off in our country? We no longer have listed counters on our stock exchange for exploration, and he has made it his specific area of focus to encourage and galvanize the industry to start exploring once again, because the plateau that we have in South Africa is still very rich with minerals buried underground. And we are saying these are the minerals that can still be exploited, that can still be mined and brought to economic value. And it is for this reason that we have prioritized the restoration of a policy and a regulatory environment that is stable and predictable. Significant work has been done to remove the uncertainty that held back the development of the industry. We have emerged from a period of strained relations where the courts became the main platform of engagement between the industry and government. Now we want to put that behind us. We no longer want to meet you in court. We want to meet you in your boardrooms, and we want to meet you in Minister Mantashe's offices. That's where we want to meet you. Now, the days and era of conflict between the industry and government, and may I also add, between the industry and labor and communities, should be something that belongs to the past. This is an era where there needs to be more collaboration, more cooperation, more consensus building, more working together. This industry will grow if we inculcate that type of culture in the way that we do this, we do things. And may I say, for us, this is a given. As government, this is a given, and indeed as South Africans, this should be a given, because this is part of our DNA. Our DNA is all about consensus building, collaboration, working together, reaching agreement, and where we differ, we clearly define areas of difference and always try to find solutions. For we were able to find solutions for the most intractable problem that ever faced the world to resolve the apartheid problem or challenge. And Nelson Mandela bequeathed this way of working to us. And it is for this reason that I say it is part of our DNA. And besides this being part of our DNA, it is a growing trend throughout the world. Throughout the world, when you go to the World Economic Forum, it's all about collaboration, consensus building, working together. And we say this value and this culture could not have found a more fertile ground than here in South Africa, a country where society, communities were just diametrically opposed to one another, where labor was constantly at war with companies, and where government was also constantly at variance, either with labor and what have you. And now we are saying, let us use this important culture to grow this industry together. We undertook this work of building consensus because we recognize the critical importance that mining plays and can still play in shaping the future of our country. To this end, we moved to speed up the finalization of the mining charter and to provide greater clarity on the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Bill. And let me immediately, as I talk about this, pay tribute to a number of you who are leaders in the mining industry, for you never gave up. You kept coming forward and raising your concerns, raising your doubts, and raising your frustrations with us. And at times, we tended to listen, but maybe half listened. But now you have our full, undivided attention. We will listen to the concerns that you may have. If you have any, it means now that you don't have any concerns, and I'm grateful for that. Now, many of you came forward, sat down with us, and as soon as the Minister of Mineral Resources was appointed, he made it his task to meet with industry players, to begin to lay the foundation for building this consensus. And by and large, we have succeeded in turning things around, and the spirit of cooperation and discussion is much better. And we had robust debates. He kept reporting to say that he has had robust exchanges. And many of you have attested to that yes, there have been robust discussions. He is tough, you are also tough, and that is what makes up a good partnership. And we thank you for being tough, because he and the government will also be tough to make sure that we reach durable, sustainable conclusions on anything that we deal with. And because of the importance of the many issues that you raised, we came up with a number of actions, number of solutions that formed a critical component of the economic stimulus and recovery plan that we announced in September last year after our economy went into a technical recession. As part of the package that we put out, government is reprioritizing spending within the existing fiscal framework towards incentives that are aimed at driving economic activity, including the financial and non-financial measures to turn around the economy of our country. We have further recognized the challenges that, yes, that you have raised, among others, where you've raised specific issues that you felt we needed to address, such as administered prices for ports, rail and electricity, as well as infrastructure bottlenecks. We welcomed, as we do now, the interactions that we have had with all of you on many of these issues, and we are working in earnest to address the constraints that you have raised, and we are addressing these issues of concern. A number of issues, as I said, specific ones such as now visa regulations that impede, that stand in the way of your officials to come to South Africa to come and work, reducing the cost of doing business, we are addressing that, eliminating many bureaucratic constraints and making it a lot easier to conduct business. This is work in progress, and the good thing is that we are in collaboration and discussion with many of your representatives on an ongoing basis. The energy, transport, and water sectors, all of which are important for the mining industry, represent the bulk of the infrastructure investment spending plans that our government has in mind for the next few years. The other important infrastructure challenge that you are all concerned about is the security and affordability of energy supply. We have been giving detailed attention to the crisis and the challenges that our electricity company, Eskom, is facing. Eskom is currently facing significant operational, financial, and structural challenges. Its contribution to the health of our economy is just far too great for it to be allowed to fail. Eskom is just too important, and in a number of ways, it is too big also to be made to fail. And we will not allow Eskom to fail. Restoring the energy security for the country is an absolute imperative. This government is going to resolve and solve the energy problem that has been given rise to by the challenges that Eskom is facing. So you can be rest assured that we are going to address this problem. In the coming few days, we will be announcing a package of measures to stabilize as well as to improve Eskom's financial, operational, as well as structural position, and to ensure security of energy supply for the economy and for the country, and also for your sector, the mining industry. This we are going to do because it is far too important to be allowed to fail. We are also working with our partners across the continent to develop infrastructure that facilitates the integration of African economies and the development of intra-regional value chains. Now, clearly, this should also be important to yourselves, because mining is not an isolated activity. It often spans right across a number of countries, and indeed, a number of your companies operate on a cross-border basis. Now, the African Union has signed up to the Africa Free Trade Area agreement to create, if you like, a common market on the African continent. We see this as a great development that is going to create a much more expanded market of more than 1 billion people, that is going to energize a number of companies and create a number of companies that will be able to sell commodities as well, the products as well as their services. We have used the opportunity of our engagement with investors to outline also another important area which has been of concern to a number of you, and that is our land reform program. Understandably, on this issue, concern has been raised about the proposal that came from the governing parties' conference about expropriation of land without compensation to be amongst the mechanisms that will be used to promote land reform. We must emphasize that our approach to this matter will enhance rather than undermine property rights, because we seek to address what we have termed the original sin that was committed against black South Africans during colonial and apartheid days, when people were dispossessed of their land, and during apartheid, when they were just moved willy-nilly from the properties that they had occupied for hundreds of years. The measure we are proposing will apply to land for purposes of land reform only, and within a clearly defined set of circumstances. This measure will be undertaken in a way that promotes economic development and agricultural output, and that does not undermine the principles of our Constitution, but more importantly, the principle of the rule of law, because South Africa as a republic is based on the rule of law. Investors need not fear that their investments and assets will be taken away from them. We must, as we deal with this matter, applaud those mining companies that have come forward and have said, we have surplus land that we do not use, that we will never be able to use. And they have indicated to us that they are willing to almost donate that land for housing, to local government, and for farming for various communities. There's a company that has invited me to go to a ceremony where they will be handing over large tracts of land, and their CEO is sitting here as well. And we applaud such efforts, and I think you should give them a round of applause for it. Now, I put this in the category of what good citizenship is all about, where companies are constructively involved in addressing a pressing social need. And may I say, since this issue was put on the national agenda for debate and dialogue, a number of either agriculturally inclined companies in the agro-processing as well as mining companies have come forward and said, we want to craft a solution. We want this matter to be resolved with us in the mix of the discussions rather than without us. And South Africa's Minister of Mineral Resources, I think, provided great detail yesterday on government's plan for the mining industry and how we are ensuring that we play our part in creating an enabling environment for investors. We are committed to these plans because we understand the importance of this industry in ensuring that we achieve our country's social and economic objectives. We appreciate and applaud the Mining Leadership Compact, which was signed this morning by the South African government, organized business, and organized labor. We are certain that the Mining Leadership Compact will enable all social partners to each do their part in contributing to the sustainable growth, transformation, and competitiveness of the industry. As I understand it, the compact sets the tone for a larger term vision for the industry, and I firmly believe that it is attainable. We're also extremely pleased that gathered here are leaders from across the African continent responsible for mining and mineral resource development in their respective countries. We need to use this platform provided by this Indaba to strengthen our collaborative efforts aimed at regional integration through the implementation of the African Mining Vision. It is through this vision, adopted by heads of state in February of 2009 at the African Union Summit, that we can ensure that the mineral wealth of our continent is developed in a manner that benefits all its people. And as government plays its role in creating an environment in which mining thrives for the benefit of all the people, we urge the industry to take advantage of the technological advances underpinning the fourth industrial revolution. I'm really, truly encouraged by some of our mining houses that are already making use of technology in quite a creative way, no longer for purposes of replacing people with machines, but fundamentally, they are seeking to improve efficiency, guarantee safety of workers, produce a skilled workforce, and most importantly, preserve jobs, and of course, become profitable. Now, as I conclude, I wish to issue a challenge to the mining industry. For the most part, I have dealt with what we are seeking to do, not only in this country, but right across the continent, as governments, to stabilize the mining industry, to improve the mining industry, to make investments in the industry much more conducive. That is the task that we have at hand, and we are committed to doing precisely that. And in doing so, we've even been prepared and committed to listen to what investors have to say, but may I add, we also listen to what labor has to say. We also listen to what communities have to say. When Minister Mantashe was finalizing the mining charter process, he went throughout the length and the breadth of the country talking not only to industry players, but to unions, to communities, and a whole range of people gave him wonderful ideas. He would often come back and say, "You've given me one of the best jobs because I'm able to meet, yes, industry players as well as ordinary people to hear their views, their concerns about this important industry that built the economy of our country." Now, we do all that to address the issues that you believe we should embark upon and correct. But today I want to say this collaborative process that we are in means that we all have tasks. It means that we all have something to do. And I'd like to believe that in doing so, we have our own responsibilities, both as government, as companies, labor, and communities. And I would like to suggest that mining companies should strive to realize what I would call the 10 value-creating principles for a modern, successful, and productive mining industry. My principle number one, is that companies should foster inclusive growth in areas where they operate. Gone are the days where mining companies can just arrive in a locality and just sink a shaft and not care about the people that it finds in the surrounding area and believe that only it exists to the exclusion of everyone. Long are the days when a mining company can just go to a locality deep in some rural area and build a road just for itself and reticulate water just for itself. That is not inclusive growth. And we are saying, if we want to have a mining industry that is modern, that is successful and productive, we now need to pay attention to some of these very important principles. It has been shown that companies that care about the upliftment of workers, of communities, are the most successful companies. We live in a world where people no longer want to have things to happen around them without their knowledge or involvement. They want to be engaged, and they want their views to be heard and heeded. Companies, government, and labor must work together to create shared value and ensure that the benefits of mining are spread and shared by everyone. The second principle, companies should partner with local governments to help local governments. And quite often in a developing country like ours, find local governments don't have the full capacity, the expertise, the knowledge of really getting things done. And as you all know, investments don't happen in the union buildings where I work or in the parliament where I also work. They happen in local areas where local government resides. And this is where mining companies should engage with your local role players, key role players, and to help come up with expertise, knowledge, and even involvement in areas such as infrastructure, such as water, roads, in the areas where they operate. Now, such infrastructure is often quite critical for the effective functioning of mines, and too often companies and municipalities do not coordinate their work, and they even operate at cross purposes. Now, there is a need for mining companies to become engaged, and sometimes it is a painful process of engagement, but it is something that has to be done. Now, the third principle for me, companies need to see investment also in the living conditions of their workers as more than a regulatory obligation. Through, for example, building decent houses for workers, companies can ensure that workers are much more productive and can demonstrate their commitment to build sustainable working communities. And such social investment, in my view, is important because it brings an end to the dehumanizing effort of what we have had in this country of the migrant labor system, which belongs to the relics of our past system of apartheid. Now, companies, if they want to be modern, if they want to demonstrate their care for their workers, need to pay attention to the living conditions of their workers. And I'm pleased to say that a number of companies are heeding this call and are coming to the fore and offering wonderful solutions. The fourth one is companies should invest in education and training. We applaud those companies that are far-sighted enough to set up early childhood development centers, as well as those that are helping to develop hardcore skills that are needed now, such as mining engineering, metallurgy, artisan training, and many other skills. We urge companies to embrace also the recommendations of the International Labour Organization Global Commission on the Future of Work. I had the privilege of participating together with the Prime Minister of Sweden in leading this commission to come up with a report. And as you remember, the ILO is an association of employers as well as labor. And they have, as they celebrate their 100th year in 2019, having been formed in 1919, they are now dealing with what the future of work is and dealing with issues that are important to the lives of working people, as well as companies. And this involves making sure that people have skills, they reskill, and they also upskill. And this will enable workers to be equipped to manage the work transition that will result from the technological changes, globalization, climate change, and what have you. The fifth principle for me is that companies should partner with training colleges, contributing to the development of curricula and providing work experience for students. Among other things, this will ensure that companies can draw on a pool of well-trained graduates with relevant skills and experience. And I'd like this to be treated very seriously by companies as you come across these colleges and even universities. Pay attention to them, to the curriculum. Be interested in what they are teaching, because it is those people who are being taught who will one day find their way to your door. And you want to have well-trained young people who will come and add value to your businesses. The sixth principle for me is that companies should embrace beneficiation. Not only does beneficiation encourage the expansion of our industrial capacity and create employment and enable the extraction of greater value from our mineral wealth, it also helps to create demand for those metals and those products and locate markets for those metals closer to the site of production. Several companies have seen the logic of local beneficiation and have started demonstrating that they are keen to work with government to develop downstream industries. I've had a wonderful experience in just the past 2 weeks where I've interacted with companies that say beneficiation used to be a swear word to us as miners. We used to say we are miners, we are not beneficiators. But now people are beginning to open their minds and their thinking to say, yes, we can mine a resource, but we can also, having mined it, find a way of adding value to it in situ so that that activity can bolster the industrial development of the country. So I would like you to be brave enough and to be courageous enough to embrace beneficiation. Do not treat it as a swear word any longer. The seventh principle for me, companies need to pay more attention and to invest more in the health and safety of their workers. As a matter of principle, workers should not be exposed to life-threatening situations or where they could suffer bodily harm. Safe and healthy workers are also much more productive. The eighth principle is companies need to provide internships, job experience, opportunities to young people, for that is the only way to prepare our youth for the world of work. But also to find ways of assisting your small and medium enterprises to enable them to be part of your value chain. Quite often mining companies are huge, gigantic organisms, and organisms on which a number of smaller companies can feed off from, benefiting the community around where your mines operate. So if you prioritize this and have a focused way of paying attention to this, you'll find that you create a wonderful, beneficial ecosystem around where your mines are. Ninth principle, companies must prioritize the development of young women through proactive hiring policies, prioritized training, promotion, as well as mentorship. My 10th principle is that companies must have the courage to include their workers in the shareholding of the companies. And they need to give due recognition to unions and be willing to bring them onto their boards as well. I've always advocated that some of your better operating companies could be where you bring in those that you would often think are opposed to you, so that you're able then to manage and tolerate dissent, different views, and so that there is greater transparency as well to yourselves, your shareholders, and to your workers. Many companies are already doing some of these things. I would like to encourage companies to have the bravery to be able to do that. Those companies that are already doing that need to be applauded, but they also need to be emulated by others, for it is through creating shared value that we can ensure a sustainable industry that benefits all. Now, if there is any industry that should start creating real shared value, it is the mining industry. The mining industry is about a collection of people who almost in working together, work together as a family in very testing and trying environments like underground, like in your processing plants and all that. And that already has the ingredients to be able to create value that could be shared all around. Our own mining industry have had a history of conflict, a history of role players looking at each other as enemies. I say that advisedly because I used to be an organizer in this industry. I was the General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers, and I operated in this industry. And I saw to my sadness how this industry was designed to be conflict-ridden. But today, I am pleased to say and to see that that conflict is beginning to evaporate. And I believe that if we can embrace some of these 10 principles of creating inclusive growth, shared value, the mining industry in our country will thrive. And these are the type of principles that can also be exported to a number of other countries on the continent. And there are many other bells and whistles that we can add to all this. And all this, together with what government is determined and committed to do to create a conducive climate for investments to happen in this industry, a combination of all this will bring together a real potent cocktail of success to the mining industry. I want to end by saying we are committed to the mining industry in this country and indeed on the continent. And that is why even President Nana Akufo-Addo is here and a number of ministers are here. It shows our clear demonstration that this is a sunrise industry. And we would like you, as investors, as operators, as managers, as chief executives, to see your own industry as a sunrise industry. Come join us as we grow this industry to the superlative levels where the mining industry belongs on the African continent. Thank you very much.